Hey, what's up, everybody? Today, we're going to be talking about a very strange event. I never really heard of it, and I couldn't find any videos dedicated to the subject matter, so I thought it would make for an interesting video with everything going on nowadays, and so that we could all investigate further. This was actually sent to me by a subscriber, so shout out to him. Not sure if he wants me to say his name or not, but thank you for sending this info, as I would have never found out about it. With that, let's get started. On a rainy evening in October 1903, according to the mainstream account, a sewer in Waterloo, Iowa was transformed into what is perhaps the strangest banquet hall ever conceived by man. This event was so unusual that it became famous during its time, with photographs showing these sewers, or what could be termed an underground tunnel, decorated for a grand feast for what seems to be very important people. This story made its way into the newspapers and even abroad, including England. According to the story, this event took place on October 14th, 1903. Banquet given in sewer. League of Municipalities entertained in the storm drain in Waterloo. Entertained? Waterloo, Iowa, October 14th. The city officials and businessmen of Waterloo this evening gave a banquet to the League of Iowa Municipalities in the dry run sewer, an immense storm drain constructed to protect the city from floods. The drain is 3,385 feet in length, 12 feet high, and 12 feet wide. It is dry except when heavy rains cause floods. A section of the sewer 400 feet in length was set apart for the banquet. A long table was spread to accommodate 850 persons. Mayor Jones of Toledo was one of the speakers. Others were Attorney General Mullen of Iowa, Mayor J.C. Williams of Oskaloosa, and Prosecuting Attorney Sherman Mears of Waterloo. Now, I find it very interesting because most of the articles in the modern day don't really mention how many people were coming to this event in the sewer. So let's just say they did construct it and they thought it was a great accomplishment. Even so, it's very bizarre. Why would you want to go down there and have a dinner? Unless this is something that has been done before by these elite groups, participating in some type of meeting in underground hidden places. Even the news articles state quite clearly that this event was for officials and politicians, higher players that would come from many different places just to see the sewer. And why did they build this massive sewer in a small town in Iowa? Well, the story is that there were several floods, even one in 1880 being described as a deluge. Dry Run Creek flowed through Waterloo, and apparently it wasn't always dry. There's a newspaper report discussing how the dry run became a mighty torrent of floods, that this also led to someone's death, and that this dry run was actually the bed of some ancient stream. This flooding was a big problem, and it happened again in 1902. The creek rose over 3 meters in just a few minutes. They knew this was going to be a problem, and they needed to solve this issue. Which, obviously, that's the mainstream story, but I find it strange that we see the same narrative in many different cities. There were massive floods, and they either needed to raise the streets or there's some type of extensive underground system beneath the city. In August of 1900, there was a newspaper discussing the proposal to construct a very substantially built sewer, and it literally says that this should do its service for centuries. Now, they do have construction photos in some of these early newspapers, but I find it weird because we really only get a few, and it's already basically done, or it's questionable whether this is really the same exact sewer, as it looks different in the photos provided, and even from inside the banquet. I mean, this is a massive tunnel. The proposal said, quote, that the walls are to be of rock about 2.5 feet thick and 5 feet high. On these is to rest an arch, also of rock and about 2 feet thick. Inside is to be 10 feet wide and 10 feet high. The bottom to be paved similar to our street pavement, except that Portland cement is to be used for filling between the brick. The bottom is to be concave so as the better to carry off ordinary sewage which will be admitted at each cross street. End quote. And that sounds great and all, but think about it. Why would you approach it like this? Is this not the first thing you should do when constructing a city? Why did it take them over 50 years since the founding of the city in 1903 to construct a sewage tunnel for flooding? It really makes no sense. It makes things very difficult. You'd have to ruin all the roads in order to make this happen, and basically just a bunch of extra work. Also, there were really only around 13,000 people in Waterloo at this time. Seems a bit strange to put all this effort into building a massive sewer, but it gets even weirder. So let me read to you some of the descriptions of the event. Well, there is a postcard that has some info on it, talking about how the table was 125 meters in length, and it looks quite extravagant. On October 15th of 1903, there was a Waterloo Daily Reporter that hailed the feast as a grand success. Visitors went away well pleased. Here's what it says. Most beautiful sight. A number of powerful arc lamps were strung about the banquet hall entrance, which was elegantly decorated with evergreens and bunting flags, etc., giving the exterior a magnificent appearance. As one actually entered the sewer, however, the view was long to be remembered. Not one of those in attendance had ever before witnessed such a dazzling sight, and without exception, the visitor would remain standing on the final flight of stairs to obtain a good view of the long table and banquet hall. Because of the limited capacity of the hall, the first course of oyster cocktail, etc., had already been placed on the table before the visitors were seated. The balance of the courses, however, were all served and in the best manner, although the space left for attendees to pass through the files of those seated was comparatively small. Dry run punch, a delectable dish, attracted no little attention. Wait, so they were drinking cocktails and dry run punch? Seems weird to me, but it continues. The toast lasted 90 minutes. Placed at each place of the banquet table was a souvenir glass containing cigars and matches. The glasses bore an appropriate inscription and in each case were carried away as a remembrance of the banquet. The menu cards were also preserved by those attending, and the thoughts of the sewer banquet will linger long in the minds of everyone who has actually eaten in a sewer. So that's a description of the event, and from the Strand magazine, March 1904, as if to suggest a danger happily past, the rain was falling outside, but no fear of flood troubled the gathering. The banquet was as successful as the construction of the sewer itself, and those who were privileged on this memorable occasion to partake of dry run punch drank it with a special gusto. This little joke of the caterer was duly appreciated. The dessert was as happily chosen, for it ended with Roquefort and water crackers. Okay, so these people are describing it like it was the time of their life, but I mean, look at this. Does this look fun to you? And why are there not more photos of this event? Why can't we see the people actually sitting and eating? We just get this weird photo of a single guy staring at the camera and the whole place is empty. Then we have this postcard photo that looks highly edited and the evergreens are moved to a higher location, so either this is a painting and they moved it or something else is going on here. Basically, there are two photos of this event. One is with the guy and the other is a postcard. But there is one more interesting detail. Well, the photo with the guy with the bowler hat was taken by a J.P. King, and this is the famous photo that is referenced by the articles and is probably familiar to anyone who already knows about this from Iowa. And remember, they said that this happened in October 14th, 1903. But interestingly, the guy who showed me this sent me this photo, which is on the Library of Congress website. This is the exact same photo, but it's a stereo version. Now look at this. Very interesting. There's a date. It says Illinois Central Excursion South, May 18th through 29th, 1903. So wait, this is from the same year, but on this it says a completely different date, and this one actually has the original copyright on the photo. Not only that, Illinois Central? So this was a part of some type of railroad expansion? Is it a railroad or a sewer? And I didn't mention this, but look at the bricks in the ground. This does not look like a brand new construction. It looks kind of old and messy, and the chairs are very creepy the way they're all lined up like that. And honestly, the table looks photo manipulated. Kind of like the postcard. You can see that the noise detail is not the same on the table compared to the guy with the hat. I mean, look at the flowers, they look pretty fake. So why would they do this? Why would they just make up an event like this? And what is the true dating? The museum that's actually trying to keep this event alive and do a similar celebration today doesn't even know the original date? Well, obviously the newspaper said that this happened on the October date, but the stereo photograph proves that there may be some variation on when this actually occurred. It's not just the photograph either. I found some interesting newspaper articles. Well, first off, Waterloo has had some other banquets, all of which seem to revolve around these clubs. Some seem innocent enough, but others are quite obviously secret societies. The Owls Club, even the Waterloo Lodge is mentioned in some of these announcements. However, after searching for newspaper articles from the dates mentioned on the stereo photograph, there are some strange details. J.P. King, the photographer, was mentioned in the Waterloo Courier on May 22, 1903, having to do with some type of railroad expansion. So those May dates are correct, as not only is Illinois Central mentioned, but it says a magnificent special train, whatever that's supposed to mean, and it lists all these important people who went to a banquet in Memphis. Several of the individuals listed were also from Mason City. What I find interesting is that J.P. King is only mentioned in the newspapers of the Waterloo Courier from what I could find on these May dates during 1903. I see no mention of him during the October dates, yet in the mainstream story, J.P. King is the photographer of the famous dry run sewer banquet in Waterloo, yet he's only mentioned in connection with Illinois Central and going to other banquets during the month of May in 1903. Also, in May 27th of 1903, there is a section on floods and how the water was rising, which caused delay to work on the sewer construction, and it literally says here how the dirt had to be hauled out of the sewer because of this flood. So wait, it seems that it was already pretty much done, as they're talking about it getting flooded and backed up. There are multiple articles from this time talking about this massive sewer getting flooded and causing issues. So I find that interesting that these dates are what were mentioned on the stereo photograph. And it's important to note that the sewer didn't even solve the problem of flooding, as there were many floods after its construction. One in 1922, one in 1929, 1933, 1945, 1947, and so on. Another thing that ties into this is that during these exact dates mentioned on the photograph by J.P. King, the May dates, well, there are multiple newspapers from the Waterloo Courier from May 19th to 25th talking about how Oddfellows were leaving Waterloo to go to Mason City, and another mentions how a bunch of Freemasons were going to be coming to Waterloo. So hold up, Mason City? Really? They're literally telling you how ingrained Masonic influence was in these cities during these times. A city of Masons? Well, this article says IOF, or the Independent Order of Oddfellows, to Mason City, and it even mentions how a large number from Black Hawk Lodge will attend. It doesn't say Freemasons, but obviously that's what we're talking about. Brothers. These Oddfellows were going to Mason City to attend dedicatory exercises of the new Oddfellows Orphan Home. Whatever that means, probably some ritual or ceremony it sounds like. Though we know Waterloo was heavily associated with secret societies, clubs, and the Oddfellows from Waterloo were associated with orphan homes. What we have is strange underground meetings or supposed banquets, which is just a fancy way to say a club that gets together and has a nice dinner. But why? And why underground? So, underground tunnels, secret societies, and these clubs are associated with orphans? If you haven't seen it, we have this whole thing on Oddfellows. But These Oddfellows and Freemasons from Waterloo are basically deeply connected. They still consider themselves brothers and participate in each other's affairs. But this is probably the craziest part. Now, who is this J.P. King, and is he associated with any type of club? Well, on the Library of Congress website, if you search for his name, something strange comes up. It seems that J.P. King was the photographer for the Oddfellows, and the very first result is a photo from that Oddfellow orphan home in Mason City. It's a photograph copyrighted by J.P. King, so the same guy who took the banquet photo, and it seems this is 15 years after that news article we were just discussing. It says the youngest children at dinner, and it's kind of weird. Maybe not creepy, but kind of, especially if you consider this is somehow connected to underground tunnels. There's another photo of a nursery. It's the Oddfellow Orphans and Old Folks Home, apparently. So yeah, if you look up J.P. King, the only photos that come up are of this Oddfellow orphan home and the famous banquet table in the sewer photo. There is this interesting article from February of 1904, which is a few months after the date given by the mainstream of October 14th, 1903. In this article from the Waterloo Courier, 1904, it discusses this event was not the only one of its kind. It's titled, "Banquet in a Conduit. Chicago comes to Waterloo for ideas of a feast. 600 served at tables over 3 blocks long. Banqueters were 40 feet below the surface of the earth? Wait, what?" Quote, "It is quite complimentary to Waterloo that a city as large as Chicago should come here for ideas concerning the up-to-date serving of a banquet. A few evenings since the feast was enjoyed by 600 Chicagoans in a conduit from tables 3 blocks long and 40 feet under the surface of the street." End quote. So in Chicago, they were doing underground banquets as well, and apparently Chicago wanted to learn from Waterloo. There's also this discussing of the Illinois Tunnel Company that was responsible for around 20 miles of tunnels, which seems quite impressive for its time. It even discusses how before the banquet, the guests were treated to a ride in electric cars underground for at least 3 miles of the tunnel, going around 20 miles per hour. Pretty interesting, because when you look into the Waterloo story, they make it seem like, oh, it was a rare, weird, and silly event. It was just some one-of-a-kind scenario. But that's not true. They did it in Chicago as well. Well, it gets even more bizarre. There are even more of these underground sewer dinners. In St. Louis, there's another very similar event. In 1916, there was supposedly a new, almost finished sewer, and to celebrate, a bunch of people came down here and apparently paid $700 to eat here. They were 100 feet underground and around 200 people came to this event. It literally describes it in the same exact way. A portion of the tunnel was transformed into a banquet. These guests, according to the newspaper articles, consisted of city officials and bankers, meaning elites, which during this time would be a part of some type of club or another. They even decorated it in a similar fashion. They were taken down into the sewer through elevators, and the dinner table was over 200 feet long. Interestingly, it says kind of the same thing as the Waterloo event, that there were no speeches. Seems like a weird thing to repeat. If it's just a dinner or a banquet, why would there be a speech? Unless it's something else. And also, it's really weird that there's this whole thing about an explosion and how the workers were really mad that they were throwing this banquet down there. And they even had 19 policemen stationed to guard the entrance, as there were threats that they would destroy the tunnel with explosives during the dinner. Why were they so upset that they wanted to destroy the tunnel? Perhaps there was something strange going on down there. I thought that was weird because it's kind of hard to find any more info on that dinner from St. Louis, and it shows that at least from what we know, there were 3 different banquets occurring underground involving the elites of a city. If it happened once, then yeah, you could argue that sure, maybe it was just a one-time thing to be silly and unique, just to celebrate the creation of a sewer. But the fact that it's happened several times brings to question the true purpose of these banquets. Obviously, these clubs like going underground to have dinners or secret meetings. Waterloo is interesting because it's another term that's used for multiple cities, and it's also Napoleon's last battle. One thing I found that may be connected is as I was searching for more information on subterranean tunnel networks in Waterloo, Iowa, there's this blog talking about potholes in Waterloo, Canada, and how it revealed a massive network of underground tunnels that was previously unknown. 14 miles had been discovered. How do you just discover old tunnels? This was similar in Charleston. One of the top tour guides was rediscovering the history of the tunnels under Charleston. How does that happen? They don't even know when these things were originally built and for what purpose. There are also the Waterloo Vaults in London, so obviously this name is associated with massive underground passages. This also connects to the subject of subterranean rivers, as it's one thing to construct a tunnel by digging up the dirt and filling it up back again, but an underground passage with a river is a whole nother level. There are many of these around the world, but I wonder if there are more that we don't know about, and perhaps many of these underground tunnels are actually much older than we have been told. Sure, maybe they did build it as they say, but it really does seem like the full story is not being told. Why wouldn't you just showcase the entire tunnel being built instead of just a few photos? Why not show more photos of the event? And why would you build these tunnels after the city is constructed? How do you just forget about waste management? Perhaps it was built for a different purpose, especially if we consider the Masons were most likely a part of this whole ordeal. Tunnels for reaching different parts of the city secretly, and for having meetings underground without the rest of the city knowing about it? I tend to think that they're not telling the full story. And if they did construct any tunnels, it was to connect to a bigger tunnel that was already there. As a random side tangent, in the movie The Three Musketeers, the Viking-like vessel goes into an underground river that leads to secret chambers that lead up to the city. So just imagine what could be beneath our cities that we don't know about. And I'm sure that many of you have been hearing the news lately. I'm not going to go too deep into it because it gets pretty dark, but what I was truly curious about is, were they really building these tunnels in New York? Or is it some type of exposure to reveal that there are underground systems and you could say societies beneath our feet? Were many of these tunnels already there and then just expanded upon? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Let us know if there are any more similar banquets or dinners that occurred underground, or even if there's anything about secret tunnels in your city. Hope you all enjoyed that, and this is going to be an awesome year, so all we can hope is that our minds may be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?